When you're hiring, as we talked about a couple of days ago, you want to eliminate as many unknowns as possible so that you know what you're getting. And when you do that, you immediately know, oh, gosh, I know my sister better than anybody on the planet. And my sister is a good, smart, hard worker. And in fact, we're twins. We're practically the same. So you hire your sister. They come in, and they often become vampires for the same traits that make you a leader. And this is where it gets really, really difficult. They're driven. They want to achieve. They're good at what they do. So they move forward, but here they forget that you own the company. You're still their sister. And they're not going to take direction from their sister. Twin sister, little sister, big sister. There's going to be that sibling rivalry that takes place when you hire brothers and sisters. That is a chemistry that you simply have to understand. So they come across as vampires because they're producing results, but they're doing it in a way that's disruptive to the other employees. Things would be said in the break room like, oh yeah, that's their brother, they get away with everything. And they ignore the fact that they're producing results. So the family element is an extremely difficult part. So what do you do about it? When you bring in a sibling, a cousin, an aunt, uncle, grandson, whatever the family relationship is, you have to clearly say, you know something? When we're at work, I'm not your sister. I'm your boss. And if you can't deal with that, we can't work together. Now, I value your contribution. You have I hold you in high esteem, and I want your value, but you need to reinforce the fact that you are part of the company. You're not running the company. And you have that honest conversation in private early in the employment relationship, or even before the employment relationship starts. If they're co-owners, that's another area where it's difficult. And I have a lot of partnerships that have vampires as one of the partners. You can't fire a partner, just like it's hard to fire a family member. You've hired someone that you can't fire. In partnerships, when you have a vampire partner, again, you have to go behind closed doors and have an eyeball to eyeball, hey, we're partners, but. Now, as a partner, do you buy into our culture? As a partner, do you buy into our values? And if you don't, let's talk about an exit strategy, because one of us are going to leave. And you just be blunt. Children, there's examples running out over and over of, got to bring my children into the business. And I don't know, not all children are the same. Not all children are capable. So you do some assessments, you do some counseling, you find out what they're good at. And you make sure that they understand when we're at work, I'm not mom, I'm not dad. And have that same conversation. The most difficult relationship and the most powerful relationship I've seen, and this happens in probably 70% of the small businesses, is a husband-wife team. And they're all in. And there's nothing more valuable than having this all-in perspective. Spouses in a healthy relationship typically don't steal from each other. So I've seen a lot of circumstances where one spouse runs the company and one spouse administers the company. They keep the books, they keep the finances and these other things because there's 100% trust there and fraud doesn't occur. But the challenge with the husband-wife or significant other relationship is that any impact that's happening outside the business comes into the business. And it's hard to keep them separate. Any problems with the business go home in the business and become pillow fights, which is not a good thing. Now, I'm talking about the fun pillow fights. I'm talking about fighting while your head's on the pillow. Some of the things I've done in husband-wife that have this inability to distinguish is I will have one of them use a different name. For example, I might be Russell, but at work I'm Russ. Or I might use their middle name. You're Joseph Scott, I'm going to call you Joseph at work and Scott at home. Or I'm going to use your maiden name at work and not your married name. So you use some symbols to help create that. Because again, the people often fall into that vampire mode because they're not doing the business the way you as the primary owner want it done. Intentions may be pretty good, but effort may be excellent, but they're doing it in a way that's damaging the relationship with the other employees. We're going to talk more specifically now about dealing with problem employees. We understood the types of problem employees you may have to address, but now we want to talk to that progressive disciplinary process or that progressive disciplinary conversation. The word progressive discipline has come into play. It goes back into what's the intent. What are we trying to accomplish? We're trying to accomplish successful employees. And until they prove the fact that they can't or won't be successful, we want to continue to working on them being successful. So the term progressive in this regard means you are progressing toward top performance. It starts with a thing called an employee handbook. Now, I know I just got a bunch of glaze overs, almost maybe worse than when I used the term job description, because that sounds like bureaucratic and legalese and so forth, but an employee handbook is the core skeleton of your culture. Going back to my analogy. In the employee handbook, it is a major way to communicate culture and a vital way to communicate the rules of engagement. Now let me show you an example I got in a workshop on how an employee handbook can express culture by using symbolism, using the way people perceive the company. I don't know if any of you have ever shopped at a furniture store based in Sweden, but this is their employee handbook. Okay? When you purchase something there, it comes in a flat cardboard box. If you haven't been to one of these stores, you may want to try it. In their handbook, there's 10 cards of their 10 corporate values. And work every day, be on time, do your best, work safe. You know, key areas that are important on the back of the cards are the rules and other places to get the information. So what's really cool about this, and I think it's an excellent practice, is they understood their culture, they understood the customer experience, and they wanted the employee interpretation of the rules and regulations to be in context of the company culture. They narrowed it down to their values, and they wrote all of their rules and regulations and policies around a value. So the typical employee handbook written by, and I don't want to slam the legal profession, but the attorneys are going to go to the employment law handbooks and they're going to pull down lots of paragraphs based on case law and employment law and different laws that are covered, and they're going to create a document that nobody reads. In fact, you know, the number one lie in our modern culture is I have read and agreed to the terms and conditions of this app. Click, download. Nobody reads that stuff, right? Well, the employment handbook is the same way. It's handed to you on your orientation day, and maybe something's changed or added, so they stuck a page in, and you have to sign it before you leave the orientation. And you only sign that you have received this employee handbook. I acknowledge the receipt of this employee handbook. The employee handbook goes home, sits on the credential. I'm going to read that. Oh, I meant to read that. I'm going to get around to reading that. What was it I was supposed to read? And it never comes up again. So you have to make the employee handbook an outline or a skeleton for your orientation and your onboarding, and it's got to be key to your culture. And it can be creative and fun, but it also needs to be practical. One of the interesting things about this is if they decide to rewrite a section, they don't have to reprint the whole thing. They reprint that card. One of the employee handbooks that I used early on was in a small half-inch 3-ring binder. It was about, I tried to find it to bring it today to show you, but it was about 6 inches by 4 inches, 3-ring binder, about 1 inch thick. And it had tabs, so that when there was a change in the law, when there was a change in policy, all you had to do is hold a meeting and say, please replace under tab 4 this page. So it wasn't too onerous to keep current. Because if you go out and you print, you've got a 10-employee company, you go to your printer, you get a price break at so many pages, so you print the minimum to get the price break, and they sit on a shelf, and half of them are outdated in 3 years. So to keep it live and valuable, I like the 3-ring punch approach. In your handbook, which hopefully you understand the value of, you want to start with some form of culture statement. Welcome to our company. Here's the history of our company. Oh, by the way, here's a DVD. I guess people still use DVDs, or is that becoming outdated too? So you may give if you still have DVDs or a Blu-ray, put a Blu-ray of the company's culture message in the handbook. Maybe it's a link that they can go online and look if we want to get a little bit more 2016-ish. So you can use video, because right now video is the best way to communicate to people. And then I like to see a general conditions section that talks about dress code, it talks about attendance, it talks about punctuality, it talks about teamwork, culture, where to park, just those generic things that are general characteristics. And you see I'm getting deeper and deeper into the handbook, because the next section is a code of conduct. And then you have a section on absolute do nots. And these are the ones where you list the terminable offenses. And you're very specific. If you sexually harass another employee, you'll be terminated. If you fight with another employee, you'll be terminated. If you steal from the company, you'll be terminated. Boom, boom, boom. 6 capital offenses, whatever the number is for your company. And you put very clear, these offenses will result in your termination. Then you have some other sections in there about the employment benefits, the employment offers, and so you end it with some of the information they need. And there's some required things in there. For example, if you offer, you can do it separately, but one way to do this, if you have a qualified retirement plan, you need to have an ERISA document in there. Employee Retirement Income Security Act talks about how the fiduciary responsibility for the plan is held. That has to be given to the employees. Privacy statements. If you have health insurance, you have to have a Health Insurance Privacy and Portability Act statement in there. You have to have statements in there for the National Labor Relations Act that say that you honor and will not oppose organizing labor. There's statements in there about you will be proactive in terms of equal opportunity rights, veterans employment, and things like that. There's a series of things that a lot of times you'll see them in break room posters. You also want to have them in the handbook. And the list goes on and on and on. But all that is kind of the boilerplate stuff in the back that the attorneys will start with. So it's valuable. You have to have it. But the stuff I was talking about up front is the stuff that the attorneys can't write for you. Well, they can, but they typically won't do it unless you know to ask for it. So enough of what goes in an employee handbook. And if you have any questions, please shoot them to us. But now let's talk about using the employee handbook in a progressive disciplinary situation. When you are in your handbook, you should have how your progressive disciplinary system progresses. We start with training. We then start with a verbal warning or re-education warning. If behavior is not changes, we may document that warning and ask you to sign it. We may give you, in some cases, a second written warning. And if behavior still doesn't change, we may suspend you from your job. And if behavior continues not to change, we may terminate you. Now notice I use the term may. I'm not an attorney. So other attorneys may disagree with the use of the term may. But I believe in flexibility of management. You want to be consistent, but you want to also have some flexibility to understand circumstances. The more flexibility you exercise, potentially the less defendable you are if you're doing it in a manner that is a prima facie discrimination. For example, if you only reprimand women for tardiness and you don't reprimand men, and there's an obvious pattern that only the women are getting reprimanded and not the men, then you have a prima facie case for discrimination, and it's going to cost you. So you have to be careful about how you are using the flexibility and make sure that you check your own unconscious or conscious biases to make sure you haven't created a pattern of discrimination. The 4 or 5 steps I just outlined are fairly generic. You have to create the progressive disciplinary process that works in your company, and that becomes the steps on the ladder. In all cases, those half a dozen immediate termination offenses have to be clearly acknowledged that these supersede any progressive disciplinary processes we've outlined. If you hit another employee, cause a fight, if you steal, if you sexually harass, all these other things I mentioned, you go directly to jail. You don't get a get out of jail card, you're gone. And you be very clear about that.